Community Care. My name is Judy Nakatomi, and I use the pronouns she and her. I serve as a minister's assistant at Vista Buddhist Temple of the Mahayana Shin Buddhist tradition. Our temple is on Kumeyaay land and Luisena land, people who were the original stewards of this land and continue to do so and be so, also called North County, San Diego. Please join me in the tradition of Gasho, palms together, bowing, welcoming, recognizing, and offering gratitude for all the conditions for us to be here today. Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu. The opening mindful verses that you saw on the screen as you were entering are gathas by Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, and the illustrations are from an artist named Mayumi Oda from the book Present Moment, Wonderful Moment. The book will be in the chat if you'd like to look at it. I have an old version of it that has these beautiful illustrations by Mayumi Oda. Gathas are like poems, and they can help us begin to dwell in the present moment. And the music that you listened to as you were entering is an original piece of music written by a temple member, Wendy Yumori, entitled Thank You, Sensei. And most of us are aware that sensei is translated to teacher from Japanese. As a reminder, we are recording the talk today. And if you have any questions for the panelists, you can put them in the chat to Casey Marume as they come up during our time together this afternoon. The format for today, each Dharma teacher will offer a Dharma talk for approximately 20 minutes each, followed by a short break. And then there'll be some optional mindful movements guided by Reverend Cristina Moon. And then there'll be an opportunity for the Dharma teachers to be in conversation with each other, facilitated by Casey Marume of Vista Buddhist Temple, with time for questions and responses. We are really grateful to be hosting this gathering together. We began in person at our temple in 2019. Our Sangha has been located there in Vista since the 1930s, so for a very long time. This is our 4th year, as I mentioned, inviting Dharma teachers, senseis from many Buddhist traditions to share the Dharma. Last year, our teachers began to collaborate on the theme and format with us, and we were lucky to listen to a lively exchange during the conversations between teachers, intersecting generations, gender, race, and traditions. We continued this year making or asking today's teachers to contribute their ideas on theme that both formed and informed where we are today. So we really want to thank the teachers for all of their feedback and creative comments and recommendations for today. We are thrilled to have and host this collective endeavor with 3 dynamic teachers. I'd like to introduce Terry Omori, who will be welcoming our teachers today. Terry is a friend and administrator of our temple, amongst many other things. Terry is currently the president of the Buddhist Churches of America, the organizing association that began in 1899 in this country to bring Shin Buddhism to the Japanese immigrants in the United States. She is the first female president of the National Organization of the Buddhist Churches of America, representing 58 temples. And this is really a major milestone in our 123-year history. And then about 15 years ago, Terry was also our first female board president of Vista Buddhist Temple. Please welcome Terry, who will in turn welcome our panel of teachers today.
Thank you so much, Judy. Women in Buddhism have had a vital role in the dissemination of the Dharma, the teachings. And today we are very fortunate to have 3 dedicated women in Buddhism. So on behalf of the Vista Buddhist Temple, it is an honor and a privilege to welcome our presenters. We have Reverend Cristina Moon, Reverend Moon is a Rinzai Zen priest from the Daihonzan Chozenji in Honolulu, Hawaii. Welcome. Mushim Ikeda is a Dharma teacher from the East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, California. Welcome. And Reverend Candice Shibata is a Jodo Shinshu priest, also known as Shin Buddhism in the United States. Reverend Shibata is the resident minister at the Buddhist Temple of Stockton in Northern California. Welcome all, and thank you for being with us today. Now I would like to turn it over to our first presenter, Reverend Candice Shibata.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Let me set my little timer so I'm very respectful of our time that I have with all of you. So I just briefly wanted to introduce myself, as Terry mentioned, and thank you so much, Terry, for that kind introduction. My name is Candice Shibata. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm currently in Stockton, serving the Buddhist Church of Stockton, also the Walnut Grove Buddhist Church, and overseeing the Cortez Hawakai, which is in Turlock in Northern California. So I am very pleased and honored to be part of this gathering, especially among the distinguished individuals like Mushim Sensei and Cristina Sensei, and of course, all of our facilitators today. So as it was mentioned, I'm part of the Jodo Shinshu Hongan Jiha, and this topic was very, very important for me to be able to express my thoughts and feelings personally and professionally regarding something that has been really on my mind, and which I think for many of us has been a topic for all of us during this time of transition and of course, some turbulent time as well. And so when I was first asked to participate, I was wondering, why would you want to ask me? I'm probably the most anxious minister amongst my colleagues in the Buddhist Churches of America. So I'm not sure really what I could offer, but definitely was honored to be able to reflect upon some of my own experiences and utilize my Buddhist lens to address some of these issues that I personally was dealing with. So perhaps with my sharing today, it will not only be therapeutic for me, but also break the stigma about addressing mental health or self-care issues, such as anxiety and burnout in our temples and with each other, with folks who might be experiencing some of the same feelings or having similar thoughts about what's going on in our lives today. So I'm passionate about this topic because before I became a minister, I was pursuing a career in marriage and family therapy. So I was actually an intern therapist at 2 local elementary schools here in Stockton, California. So as a teenager, I was always interested in psychology, intrigued about relationships and how they affect us, curious about just human nature in general. And this interest continued after my completion of my undergraduate work at Sacramento State. And while I was working as a case manager for infants and toddlers who had special needs. So I coordinated and advocated for their needs and arranged different therapies in their homes. But of course, those families that I was assisting, they were also going through a lot of feelings and a lot of different developmental concerns regarding their children. So it was during this time that I was working that I began feeling anxious about my caseload and my responsibilities. However, this probably wasn't the first time that I experienced anxiety and that it crept into my life. So I wouldn't doubt that I probably was a pretty anxious young person because I always, till this day, suffer from procrastination. So I was the type of kid who waited till the last minute to do things. I would be rushing out the door with my shoes in my hands, jumping into the car as my sister and my mom were waiting for me in the morning to take us to school. Every project that I did while growing up was a race against time. when I was younger, I couldn't type very fast or correctly. And I didn't end up taking typing in middle school. So even today, I'm still a poor typer. But I would inconveniently ask my mom to type reports that I had previously handwritten. And then she would be able to type the report for me, of course, because I probably asked her the night before it was due. So to be honest, I did manage to receive decent grades despite my constant procrastination, which I realize now really, really inconvenienced a lot of people. So science and math, that's a different story because I never really could grasp those types of subjects, but I always loved writing. I always loved history. So while I was younger, my mother made a comment to me, which has haunted me into adulthood. And although I understand that her intention was good, and she really didn't mean to cause me any harm, the impact of her comment has affected my self-confidence even now. So after she helped me with the project, and I received a good grade on it, my mother said to me very proudly, "Look how well you did. You did a good job. Just think about how much better you could have done if you didn't procrastinate." So again, although I know she meant it as a compliment, probably a backhanded compliment, and although in fact I did do a good job, my mom, somebody who I deeply love and I deeply care for and connected to, she had a profound impact on my self-confidence, making me self-doubt my abilities well into adulthood, leaving me to wonder, am I ever going to be good enough? So again, it wasn't her intention to have me have these feelings or thoughts. It was the impact of her statement that's left a lasting impression on me. So I regret that I might have painted a picture of my mom being really cruel and really mean. However, she was the polar opposite of that. She was loving and caring, generous and funny, nurturing, and so many more wonderful qualities. And we did have a loving bond between mother and daughter. So that's why I was devastated when she passed away 19 years ago. She suddenly passed away due to a brain hemorrhage, and she was only 59 years old, and I was only 25. So if you can remember being maybe 25 and feeling like you might be on top of the world, you might have just graduated college, university, trade school, you're venturing out into the world and trying to discover who you are. But then before you even realize what's happened, your mother has collapsed in the kitchen, somewhere where she had always provided warmth and comfort and was always her domain, and everybody knew it, and everybody gathered around the kitchen and my mom. And so this point in my life is when I probably experienced severe depression and severe anxiety, and it became a constant and unwanted companion in my life. So if you can imagine, after my mom's passing, the anchor of my life was suddenly gone. And she was the parent who I would go to for comfort. And as I mentioned before, she would bail me out of situations when I found myself running out of time to complete my needed tasks. She was the nurturer of my sister and I, while our father was the quiet doer. And he was the individual or parent in our family who worked hard every day, supporting and caring for us and showing us his love through his hard work. So to be quite honest, after my mom died, I found myself very grief-stricken for several years, it feels like. I yearned for the past, for the days in which my mom was still with us, which caused me then great depression. I was anxious about the future and not having her in our daily lives, wondering how could I ever live without her. So to be honest, much healing has happened. Again, it's been 19 years since she's passed, but I think in many of us, our grief doesn't really go away. I think that might be a universal thing, that grief doesn't necessarily go away. I think it eventually transforms in our life, causing us to have even greater love and greater appreciation for our loved ones who have passed away. But my grief creeps into my life at different situations. And they may not have to deal directly with my mom, but they can definitely feel similar. So one of these instances occurred when I was serving at my first temple assignment, which was the Berkeley Buddhist Temple in the Bay Area of California. So it was a wonderful first assignment, and I had made beautiful connections with the Sangha members there. And many of them became like mothers to me or aunties to me, because they were always taking care of me and just extending their love and care on a daily basis. So, however, to my surprise, I was notified by the bishop at that time that I was going to be transferred. So, to be quite honest, I felt sideswiped and really caught off guard, since it had only been probably a year and a half after I had started there, but it was inevitable that I was going to be moved. So, immediately thinking, and just remember all of my childhood things, I wondered if I had done something wrong, or did somebody complain? Was I not meeting the temple's needs? But the bishop at the time reassured me several times, after me asking several times, that no, I didn't do anything wrong. So here my brain went, my very anxious brain. You're not good enough. You did something wrong, and you should have done better during your time at Berkeley. So, of course, my broken heart, especially missing my mom, had told me, and my mind was telling me, I just wanted more time at Berkeley. I just wanted more time with everybody. So again, although my mom wasn't a part of this equation, it was that same feeling of yearning, of just wanting more time with my mom, or wanting more time with my Sangha members who just meant so much to me. And I was devastated that I had to leave. But in our tradition, in the Buddhist churches of America, I knew that this was inevitable. At any time, we could be transferred. And we know it's a new opportunity. It's a new opportunity to spread the Dharma, Buddha's teachings. It's a new opportunity to care for another congregation or Sangha.
No,
However, it just was probably the most difficult thing I had to deal with in my first assignment of being in Berkeley. So as I mentioned earlier, I was interning as a marriage and family therapist, and this was after my mother had passed away. So I was still working as a case manager, and my mom had passed, but I was ready to be able to pursue my wish of wanting to be a therapist. So you would think at that time too, after going through my studies, my graduate studies at the University of San Francisco, that I would have a tool bag ready to address even my own mental health, not only my patients or my students, but of course my own mental health. But unfortunately, during this time, I just couldn't even manage to open my own toolkit. It was sitting right in front of me, and I didn't know how to open it. So I had the opportunity to seek additional support of a therapist. And this wasn't the only time that I had pursued therapy. There were other parts and other occasions in my life where I did see a therapist, and had always found it very helpful to address maybe some issue that was coming up for me, and just being part of my self-care during that time. So from the therapeutic perspective, and I would like to just kind of shed light on some of my own anxiety. And of course, as a brief disclaimer, I'm not wearing my hat, my therapy hat or therapist hat. I'm now wearing my ministerial robes. But of course, this is from my own perspective and my own experiences of going through therapy. And I found so many beautiful connections to the Buddha Dharma in this particular therapeutic modality. So again, this is just a little disclaimer that I'm not promoting any therapy per se, but it's something that's worked for me. So I'd like to share my screen just to show you just a little bit of this specific model. Okay, and so many of you might be familiar with this particular model, and it's called the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Model. Okay, and so from the American Psychological Association, CBT as the synonym, or excuse me, the acronym, is based on several core principles, including psychological problems are based in part on faulty or unhelpful ways of thinking. And psychological problems are based in part on learned patterns of unhelpful behavior. People suffering from psychological problems can learn better ways of coping with them, thereby relieving their symptoms and becoming more effective in their lives. And so CBT treatment usually involves efforts in changing our thinking patterns. And some of the strategies are might include, but not limited to, learning to recognize one's distortions in thinking that are creating problems, and then to reevaluate them in light of reality. Gaining a better understanding of the behavior and motivation of others, using problem-solving skills to cope with different situations, and learning to develop a greater sense of confidence in one's own ability. Like, I'm thinking, was this modality made for me? I feel like, man, I need to work on all of these different things. So CBT treatment also involves efforts to change behavioral patterns. These strategies might include, but not just these: facing one's fears instead of avoiding them, using role-playing to prepare for potentially problematic interactions with others, and learning to calm one's mind and relax one's body. So while I was going through even my own CBT treatment and addressing some of these thoughts that I had that were then leading to some of my behaviors that I wanted to change, I was thinking, wow, this sounds like something that I've learned while going to Dharma school or our Sunday school program at the temple in Stockton. So you might be familiar with the Eightfold Noble Path. And so this was part of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths, of course, in regards to addressing suffering. And when I think about our mental health and our burnout, and specifically my own burnout, it felt like I was suffering in my day-to-day life. And I really wanted to address it, not only from a therapeutic modality, but also from the Buddha Dharma that's always provided comfort for me growing up. And so, again, when we're addressing suffering, we know that there is a cause, and that cause is our own gas, our greed, our anger, or ignorance, or stupidity. That's why we call it gas in many of our Jodo Shinshu temples. We all suffer from gas. So how do we address that gas, or how do we find a little bit of comfort knowing that it can be extinguished? And how can we do that? And from the Jodo Shinshu Buddhist perspective, the Eightfold Noble Path is kind of like a mirror for us to reflect upon. So we may not be able to get rid of all of our gas, all of our greed and anger and ignorance during our lifetime, but what we can do is look at the Eightfold Noble Path in a way to help us look at our own thoughts that then allow us to reflect upon our speech, our conduct, our view, our livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and meditation. And so I was thinking, this is really similar to CBT, because it does allow us to originally think about our thoughts and really reflect upon, how does it affect our daily lives? How does it affect our speech and the way in which we communicate with others? How does it affect the way that we treat ourselves and care for ourselves, but also treat other people? How does our own thought affect the way in which we work in our day-to-day professions? And how does that then affect our effort in everything that we do? So I was thinking this is very similar to CBT. However, I think one of the main sources of comfort for me as well, speaking from the Jodo Shinshu perspective, was the vow of Amida Buddha. Amida Buddha as the Buddha of infinite wisdom and compassion, knowing that despite all of my shortcomings that I feel that I have, of not being good enough or needing to do better, or being a woman and not being able to be as smart as my male colleagues, so many of these insecurities, even though I might have all of them, I'm still embraced in Amida Buddha's vow of wisdom and compassion, allowing me to place my palms together in Gassho, to say the name of the Buddha with deep, deep gratitude, knowing that I'm embraced just as I am. I'm accepted and loved just as I am. And for me, that was a huge turning point, a huge turning of my heart and mind to be able to realize, despite everything I had gone through in regards to my mom's passing, I was always embraced. And that essentially led me to the ministry. So oftentimes I wonder, would I have become a minister if my mom was still alive? Maybe not. But because of her, I was able to encounter the Buddha Dharma in such a significant and powerful way that really motivated me and made me passionate about sharing the Dharma with other people. And so with that, I know my time is up, and I'm just so honored and privileged to be able to share my personal story, of course, of my own depression and my own anxiety, but also to share the working of Amida Buddha's great compassion in my life as well. So thank you so much, everybody, for the opportunity and time to share my story with you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Candice. Such a personal, insightful, and important talk. I think the more of us that can talk about, mental health and how it impacts our physical health and how we touch other people and vibe and reverberate off of each other is really important. Thank you so much. Offering the Dharma. Now I'd like to invite Reverend Cristina Moon.
Hi, everyone. Just want to check first. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Vista Church, for having me here today. I'm really excited to speak on this topic of how Buddhism helps us sustainably navigate our exhaustion. And they really are exhausting times. I'm going to take a perspective from where I'm sitting, which is in Hawaii and at Daihonzan Chozenji, which is a Rinzai Zen temple. If you're not familiar with the sort of inner workings of Zen, the more dominant, more popular sect of Zen is Soto Zen. And then there's Rinzai Zen, which is sort of the sect that I'm in. Some people would say that the breakdown in Japanese medieval society was that Rinzai was for the samurai and the military caste, the shoguns, folks like that. So that's going to inform a little bit of the flavor of what I talk about. When I got this prompt of, how can Buddhism help us in these really challenging times, a couple things came to mind. And what I settled on wanting to talk about is an idea that might be a little unfamiliar to folks, but is really central to sort of what my training in Zen and Buddhism has been, especially over the past 5 years since I've lived here at Chozenji. And it's an idea that comes from this book. I hope the title's not showing up backwards for you like it is for me, but it's Fudochi Shimaroku, which is a series of letters from the Zen master Takuan, the namesake of the pickle, Takuan. And they're a series of letters actually to Yagyu Munenori, who was a samurai. He was an actual samurai, like with a castle. And, this might feel like a funny sort of person to invoke into a conversation about Buddhism. Technically, his job was to kill people. And I think in the Buddhist sort of area, we're sort of like, oh, why would this Zen master be interacting with him? But this is the openness of Zen and of Buddhism, to really be oriented towards not just saving all sentient beings, but I think to be really practical about the world that we live in, to see with clarity what's right in front of us. So Zen Master Takuan is trying to explain in these series of letters the concepts of Zen in terms that this guy, Yagyu Munenori, a master swordsman and samurai, can understand. And so he explains them in the concept of swordsmanship. And one of the principles that he really comes down to and he dissects really deftly is called the immovable mind, Fudo Shin. And this idea of an immovable mind, he explained through swordsmanship in the sense of, like, if you were facing Yagyu Munenori, samurai, you had to fight 10 men at a time, or 10 men one after another. How would you do it? And if your mind got stuck on the tip of one sword, you're a goner. If your mind is stuck on fighting number 3 while you're fighting number 7, you're a goner. And so he talked about this immovable mind as not a mind that doesn't move, but a mind that can move in all directions. And that's essentially, that's free. Immovable in the sense that it can't be moved and stopped by an outside force. It doesn't encounter an obstacle and gets stuck on it. A really good metaphor is like a ball that's floating down a swiftly moving stream. And a ball can hit a rock, it can hit a branch, and it's just going to turn and turn and then find the way to move around the obstacle. Versus, say, like, a garbage bag or a piece of paper that's going to smack into a rock and then just get stuck there and get battered by the water and the current. So Zen Master Takuan is describing this immovable mind, and through the, context or metaphor of 10 successful and successive encounters in swordsmanship. But this immovable mind is a Buddhist principle that even those of us who aren't swordsmen and who aren't samurai or Zen masters can really utilize, especially when times are really hard like they are right now. And it's not, the tone of it is not, I think, how usually people think of, how Buddhism can help me when times are tough, because we often come to Buddhism, meditation, mindfulness practices as a means of sort of like, I need to step back from the things that are hard. I need to take refuge. I need to calm myself and find some peace. And here is this principle from Buddhism that's very, very different. Go right into the encounter and the challenge that you're facing, and with this sort of like vigor and energy and clarity. So the way that we can think about it, maybe a more apt metaphor for us in the modern world is like, if you've ever sat in front of a fan and you have the blades of the fan and they're going in front of your face. I used to do this when I was little, when I was a kid, because I would make sounds in front of it and the sounds would get all cut up and distorted, and I thought it was so cool. But if you look in front of a fan and you see the blades of the fan going, there's a way to look through the blades, so you see all this stuff. The blades of the fan as a metaphor for my thoughts, my attachments, the challenges in my life, my emotions. Okay, I can see all this stuff, but I can also see everything else. And that's very different from being stuck on the blade of the fan, on my emotions, on my habits, on my attachments, on what so-and-so just said that annoyed me, or something like that. And so here's this idea of, okay, this immovability, this mind, kind of capital M mind, that's immovable because it doesn't get stuck on the blade of the fan. It doesn't get stuck on what just happened so that I can't be here with what's going on in front of me right now. I really like talking about the immovable mind, Fudoshin, also because I think, this webinar is an effort, is reflective of a greater understanding that we have to find ways to make Buddhism relevant today, especially in the communities, the Asian American communities who've been Buddhist for many generations. We have a lot of young folks who are leaving Buddhism, leaving our temples, and a lot of temples are struggling to find ways to stay relevant, especially sort of against the onslaught, I think, of a certain commodified, essentialized version of Buddhism that's gaining popularity among celebrities and stuff. And I really like this idea of Fudoshin and Zen Master Takuan's letters to the samurai, because he was innovating and trying to make Buddhism relevant in the time he lived in back then, like the 12th century. And so that's really, it's a never-ending challenge that we have to figure out as people within Buddhism, how we continue to apply practically, the principles, the spirit, and that seed of the Dharma, and in ways that may seem very unconventional, but maybe just as powerful as this idea of Fudoshin translated for a samurai. My experience is that when one approaches life this way, okay, I want to cultivate this quality of having an immovable mind. It turns all of life into a dojo, a place, which means a place to train in the way, a place to be on the path. And we usually, I can say dojo, and dojo has a certain meaning to me because Chozenji is not only a Zen temple, it's also a martial arts dojo, and we train in a lot of different martial and fine arts. But I really love this idea of dojo doesn't mean within four walls. It just means a place to train in the way, to train in the Dharma, to be on the path, to be in accord with some fundamental rhythm of the universe. It's bigger than just us. And I don't say this glibly at all, but when you approach life this way, it really takes even the hardest things that we encounter, and it turns them into opportunities to develop ourselves, to realize our true selves. Whether you think of that as becoming enlightened or just being the person that you want to be, it's a really precious opportunity. And one that I think, can be challenging to figure out how to do, because it's really like, okay, if I treat life that way, all of life is training, the whole world, my whole life is a dojo. There are no throwaway moments. So it's like, okay, how I wash the dishes, how I drive my car, how I type on my keyboard, how I sit, my posture, how I breathe, like all of these things then become really good material to work with. Can I use this as a tool to develop myself? Even this thing that I would think is, it's so mundane, it has no spiritual sacred significance at all. But really, actually, the way to make your life a dojo, the way to cultivate this Fudoshin is, it's like laughably practical. It really is just like, okay, sit zazen, meditate, do it in some form, use it as a chance to reset yourself, ideally every day, and find ways to make every activity that you do a way to refine and develop yourself. And it's really helpful. And what is exceptionally wonderful about Japanese culture is that Japanese culture found a way to make every activity, and especially the arts, ways to develop ourselves, ways to realize our true selves. And that's why it's called Kendo, the way of the sword, not just Kenjutsu, technique of swordsmanship or sword fighting. And that's why it's called Cha-do, the way of tea, Ka-do, the way of the flower. So we're incredibly privileged, I think, for those of us who have some contact with Japanese culture and the arts, to have some ready-made vehicles here that Buddhism has flowed through as a sort of practical embodiment for a long time. I wanted to share really quickly one example, or maybe another example of someone who approached really hard, challenging experiences and with this certain feeling of not just like, how do I manage taking care of myself in this moment, but how do I see it as something much bigger? And so I wanted to sort of call Queen Liliuokalani into the room, into our collective digital room. Queen Liliuokalani was, she was a hero to the Native Hawaiian people. She was overthrown by the American government in the end of the 19th century, when the Kingdom of Hawaii was overthrown and annexed into the United States. And she really is credited for having saved hundreds of thousands of lives by negotiating, essentially, by not fighting. People were ready to go and fight, but she told them to sort of stand down and to be patient, and that the tides of time would turn so that Native Hawaiians could continue to exist and the Kingdom of Hawaii could continue to exist. There's a quote that she has from that time. She wrote it at that time, but she actually told her sisters and caretakers to not make it public until after she had passed away. And what she said at that time was, I could not turn back the time for political change, but there is still time to save our heritage. You must remember never to cease to act because you fear you may fail. The way to lose any earthly kingdom is to be inflexible, intolerant, and prejudicial. Another way is to be too flexible, tolerant of too many wrongs, and without judgment at all. It is a razor's edge. It is the width of a blade of pili grass. To gain the kingdom of heaven is to hear what is not said, to see what cannot be seen, and to know the unknowable. That is aloha. All things in this world are two. In heaven, there is but one. So this quote is featured on a new series of posters, and I have them behind me, that Chozenji just created. Back in the 80s, we had this campaign at Chozenji called the Aloha Spirit Campaign, which was to really try to hold on to, revive the spirit of aloha in the islands. And so we just redid the posters again. Back in the 80s when we made them, one of them had Miyamoto Musashi, the famous samurai, on one of them. And the quote was always her one in the end. And then it feels like a really great reflection of the times that now the poster is a quote from Queen Liliuokalani. And I bring this up because I bring up Queen Liliuokalani and her quote because it's a great example of finding the way in the biggest sense possible. She says, in all things in this world are two. We live in an inherently dualistic, rational world. There is me, there's you, there's inside, there's outside, there's right, and there's wrong. In heaven, there is but one. And it's that sense of everything is interconnected. It sounds a lot like how you would describe the Dharma and the Tao, the way. And Queen Liliuokalani was Christian. She wasn't Buddhist, but she sort of arrived at the same point as, say, Zen Master Takuan. And there's something that's really powerful in that. I think as a Zen person speaking to a mostly Shin Buddhist audience, that felt important to me to sort of bring into the room, because I know that there can be a feeling of like there's difference between us and how we practice or live Buddhism. But I kind of wanted to bring Queen Liliuokalani in here because here's someone who wasn't even Japanese, she wasn't Buddhist, and she arrived at the same point, which speaks to a certain universality of the human experience. So just to return to the title of this event, and sort of what I've been talking about, to find the way, and a way to develop yourself in everything that you do, and how that really is something that we can take from Buddhism for challenging times. I want to remind people that when we, particularly as Asian American Buddhists, when we look for ways to take care of ourselves so that we can bear these challenges, and we find those ways, or we look for those ways in our temples and in our dojos, that also is community care. It's self-care and it's community care. And it's not just for the community that's here today, but it's also for the community that comes tomorrow. The people for whom the temple will still be there. The dojo will still be there because we've been a part of it. We helped hold it together. We absorbed the teaching and we helped pass it on, or just make sure the doors stayed open. Our temples and our dojos have been historically places that our communities have cultivated strength, physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual strength. And we really want to keep them ready and open for the next generation. And there are resources within them and within the Dharma. And in particular, I think these innovative ways that people have used it in the past and are using it today to try to help us figure out how to bear these challenges that we face. So I guess in sum, just to say, there are a lot of different flavors that you can bring from Buddhism to figure out how to face really challenging situations, these exhausting times. We can find refuge in a sense of greater oneness, like in Queen Liliuokalani's description of aloha. But we can also find an immovability and that sense of being bigger than the obstacles that are in front of us. Always moving, able to move in any direction, and free without getting stuck on what's right in front of us.
Thank you so much, Reverend Moon, for your Dharma message and for sharing with us an important Buddhist principle. I learned a lot about what you shared about the immovable mind, and it really makes a lot of sense to me now. And so, and a practice that I need to develop into my own spiritual awareness. So thank you so much for sharing and for helping us also be more aware of our interconnectedness. So thank you very much. Now I'd like to introduce our third presenter today, Mushim Ikeda. I'm so sorry. Mushim Ikeda, thank you so much. You're going to be sharing with us, and we really look forward to hearing what you have to share.
Thank you all very much. I'm just kind of looking around our Zoom room, and thank you for those of you who have your cameras on. It always helps me to feel I connect with you. And if you don't, that's perfectly fine. However, I love looking at the Sangha and just sort of basking in your warmth. So thank you very much. Yep, I see a few and some animal companions, it looks like. Okay. So my name is Mushim. That's a Korean Zen Buddhist name. And I myself am third generation Japanese American, or Sansei. However, when I became interested in practicing Buddhism, the Sangha that I found in Ann Arbor, Michigan in 1982 was a Korean Zen lineage temple. And we were just starting our daughter temple of the mother temple in Toronto. So we had already had a very diverse and multinational Sangha. I was trained by Canadians to, as an American, whatever they said, I would just bow down. I instantly submit to a Canadian. Although they have their own problems too, to say it. However, maybe not as much as the United States. So, so my training has been both monastic and lay, and I really appreciate what I've been hearing from our previous two teachers. Mental health is huge, I think, traditionally in many Asian American communities, and it can be in non-Asian American communities too, and in non-American communities, that mental health issues, which of course have spiked incredibly during the pandemic, can bear a stigma. So I want to thank Reverend Candice so much for bringing forth mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. So for those of you who are interested, you might want to Google thought distortions or cognitive distortions. There are several lists on the internet. They're all similar. And basically, they're pointing us towards kinds of thoughts that are, as indicated, distortions. They're not, they might be partially real, but they're not really that, they're not accurate. And even more so, they're harmful to us. So I've done quite a bit of work in CBT. I find it very consonant with Buddha Dharma. And one of the cognitive distortions is catastrophizing. Whenever you hear something and then you instantly, worst case scenario, because I come from a family of worry-prone Japanese Americans. My Buddhist nephew, when he was in elementary school in Hawaii, where he was raised, his mother is a Zen priest. He was in school, and the teacher said, "Today we're going to teach you about the samurai warriors." And my nephew raised his hand and he said, "I'm a samurai warrior." So we are prone to worry. So I'm prone to catastrophizing, and I gave a name to my catastrophizing mind, which was Chicken Little. You know, the story of Chicken Little, and something falls down and Chicken Little is like running around screaming, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling." So what can I say? Go back to, for us here, I'm in Oakland, California, on the land of the Confederated Villages of the Lishan Ohlone, and March 18th, 15th, something like that, we were 3 days out from shelter-in-place lockdown for the global COVID-19 pandemic, and the sky was falling. And so then that question becomes, well, if it is accurate, then what the heck do we do? And I was really also wanted to appreciate Reverend Moon, Cristina Moon, for Furoshin Immovable Mind, and also, my experience of Zen is the minute you say one thing, it generates the opposite, which is equally true. So you've got this immovable mind, and then you've got this ability to flow and move as things are changing. And I feel that both are good to think about. The talk I prepared to share with you is called Caring, Connection, and Creativity. So 3 C's: caring, connection, and creativity. How to recharge our batteries. I'm sure, like many or all of us, I have been pooped. I've just been exhausted during the pandemic. And I'm not getting any younger either, so there is that factor. And as I thought about this, what I wanted to share with you again is caring, connection or connectivity, and creativity. And you can mash them up too. You can have caring creativity and creative connection, and you get the idea. That I feel that these are qualities that can really, really help us. And that while I can certainly make connections to the Buddha Dharma and to Buddhism, and we brought up the wonderful Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, so on, that for me, these are spiritual qualities that span all faith traditions and all religions. They're about who we can be as human beings. And I'm very fortunate because I live with my teacher, AKA adult son, and he was raised as a Buddhist. And when he was 2 years old, he didn't really talk that much. He could, but he just chose not to. And unless he really wanted to say something. And we were living at Green Gulch Farm Zen Center, which was one of the 3 practice centers of San Francisco Zen Center, between the time he was 1 and 2. So it was right near the end of our time there. And he was sitting in his high chair with, I think, food smeared all over his face, and we were just living our everyday lives. And suddenly he burst out with this manifesto, and he shouted, "I am not a Buddha, and I am not Buddhist." And I was trained as a Zen student, so I thought, fine, Dharma combat, mommy can do it. So I said, "That's fine, what are you?" And he said, "Anything." So I've been trying to live up to that. And so once again, it's this, I feel this creative ability to connect in a caring and compassionate way that can help us to recharge our batteries and to pull ourselves back from getting so exhausted that we fall apart, and then we need to be taken care of by others. That is not ultimately a bad thing. However, if each of us can practice, as is said in justice activist circles, self-care is community care. The more we take care of ourselves, it's not a selfish act, it is a selfless act, because then the community becomes stronger. So I'd like to unpack my 3 C's just a little bit. And that is, again, caring, connection, and creativity. They're not separate. They're all interconnected, which of course is very Buddhist. And to just ask for some, you contain your own wisdom. That's what I think. And so to ask you to do just a little bit of mindful reflection. If you have a pen nearby or your phone, you might want to jot down a few words or make a little drawing, or to, just, these are questions that might be helpful to you after this event, when this wonderful gathering is over. So the first is caring and care. And I'll just ask you to consider for yourself, not for anybody else, what is care? What are acts of caring for you, not for anybody else? What do you care about the most? So part of my training was in the Korean equivalent of Rinzai Zen, I believe. And it was working with what's called Hwadu practice. And Hwadu means word head. So it takes the koans, those meditation questions that we can't solve by thinking about them. But then if we don't think about them, we're kind of screwed too. So, and it takes just the first word of it, and then that's what the investigation is. And so I formulated my own Hwadu recently, which is, what is the most important thing? Or Witmit, W-I-T-M-I-T, what is the most important thing? And what was it, last May, I think, some Dharma friends and I had the good fortune that we rented a beautiful Airbnb overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Northern California, and just spent about 4 days sitting with and meditating and having Dharma dialogue with, for each of us, what is the most important thing? So you don't have to tell me, you don't have to tell anyone. It might be good to just check in with yourself. When we know what the most important thing is, then our compass just naturally, the needle just keeps going back to what that is. And we get this sense of happiness and self-confidence. Well, my life kind of sucks right now. However, I know that it's really, I have a direction. I have a direction. And that's a direction that we achieve with imperfection, and it is not a neat process, at least in my mind, and that's okay. It's okay to flounder, it's okay to be exhausted, and it's okay to collapse and cry help, help every once in a while, which I freely do. So again, going on, how does it feel when you express caring for others? Where do you feel it in your body? How does it feel? And how does it feel for you when you receive caring from others? During the pandemic, needless to say, we've all suffered so much. I mean, big deficit of hugs and sharing of food and all the ways that humans connect with one another, that sanghas and communities bond. So how does it feel now with all of that experience behind us? For me, I was able to recently get approved for a set of 6 acupuncture sessions at Oakland Kaiser, where I have my medical care, and I have this wonderful acupuncturist. I think she's a single mother, and she just makes me feel so cared for. It's just nourishing. So just asking to reflect on caring. Next, let's shift to considering caring plus, nothing is isolated from anything else, caring plus connection. Connection to what? Connection to what is life-supporting, life-giving, nourishing. If we're able to walk, that thing that puts the kind of a spring in on our step instead of dragging our butts along exhausted. What is it that gives us that extra little gleam in our eye, that spring in our step? And how does it feel when you feel connected to good things in a caring way? How do you feel, not anybody else, when you feel connected to what for you are good things in a caring way? And now here's a little challenge. What's one energizing connection you can make before bedtime tonight? That might be texting a friend, or spending extra time with your animal companion, or warm bath. I don't know what it is. What's one energizing connection you can make, including with yourself, before bedtime tonight? Connection is, for me, the most important thing. I just said, what is the most important thing? It's the most important thing. So my cousin, Reverend Jiko Mary Beth Nakade, is priest of her childhood temple, Daifukuji Soto Zen Mission Temple on the Big Island of Hawaii. And I was visiting once several years ago, and her temple had become part of something called the Blue Zone Project. And I think one of our moderators has a link you can please put in the chat. And the Blue Zones is a wellness project. And they advocate for forming support groups called MOAIs, M-O-A-I, which is an Okinawan term for lifelong support groups that are traditional to that culture, which is very long-lived. And so that's where I learned this term MOAI. And at the start of the pandemic, I'm very attached to my yoga teacher. And we had a small group of yoga students, most of whom themselves were teachers before the pandemic. And we would meet and do a class together. And this teacher is very unusual because he's just not that egocentric. And so he would recognize that there were many teachers among us and say, would you like to contribute an asana or pose? So we developed this unusual sharing circle where it would emerge spontaneously, one person would build on another. It was really, you never knew what was going to happen. It was really wonderful, and we closely bonded. And we began to call ourselves the Moai. So when the pandemic hit, we started Zooming every Tuesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. and for the Moai. And you know what? It's 3 years later, and we're still meeting. We're still meeting every Tuesday because we've helped each other through the terror and the frustration and the not knowingness. And some of us have young children. We're in different stages of life. We're from different cultures, and we were really able to bond through the practice of yoga, which means joining or yoking. So we did it. So you might think about and look into the blue zones and how they define the moais and the activities of moai. One activity that I did at Daifukuji Soto Zen Temple when I was there is a walk and talk. And people would gather together for a moai blue zone meeting, and then you would form pairs and just, if you're able to walk, just walk around and talk to each other. Just walk and talk, walk and talk. And there's something about the physical activity of walking and talking that is very connective. It's very good for one's health. And I don't know, you begin to sync to one another and get into one another's rhythm. People who can't walk or who are elderly or had mobility issues would sit on a bench and watch us walk, and other people would come up to them and then talk to them. So everyone was included. So that's something that we might do with one another in a very simple way. Say, you want to do a walk and talk? And thus we form our moais. Now, if we like, let's hold caring plus connection and add to them our third C, which is creativity. And creativity to me is it is to me what gives my life meaning. And I would like to invite everyone into it. It's very broadly speaking. So I'll just give you, as in closing, a brief a story. And that is that my mom's family grew up in Hawaii, on Oahu. Their family store is still there, the Sawada store on Kane Street in Wahiawa. My cousin Nathan now owns and manages it. And my grandparents' marriage was a mixed marriage. Grandpa was Soto Zen, and Grandma was Jodo Shinshu, I believe, was Shin Buddhist. And so my grandpa died when I was in high school. And then my grandma, my Obachan, she lived a lot longer. And when she was quite elderly, there was a hurricane, and it knocked down the little bungalow next to the bungalow behind the store on Kane Street, where she had raised her family of 5 kids and practiced the Nembutsu. And she broke her hip. And I was in Ohio, and I thought, oh, poor grandma. She's probably going to die soon. You know, she's broken her hip, and this hurricane came. But grandma not only got better, she went next door where the house had been, the debris had been taken away, and she planted a vegetable garden. So any way that we can find to be creative, to join with what is life-giving, generative, growing plants, vegetables, flowers, children, the arts have been mentioned. And really we don't need to think of it and get all uptight about gotta be an artist. If we can cook a food in a new way, if we can just bring in anything that is new, that is new and that connects us with life, then that's the kind of creativity I am talking about. So thank you so much. And once again, caring, connection, and creativity. And I hope that we can all join together in order to go forward with more energy, more joy, more happiness, and more compassion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mushim. So much food for thought here from you and from all of our teachers. And I'm just really enjoying the questions. I believe as I scrolled around the tiles that many folks were taking notes and maybe drawing photos or drawing pictures or something as well. So I'm really happy the way that you were also able to thread the teachings of the three of you, the three teachers. And when I say wisdom and compassion, I'm not trying not to be stuck in the box of wisdom in one way, of sharing the Dharma. And there's so many Dharma doors that are available to us. And I'm just really appreciating the many avenues in which we're all entering together, because I think we're all learners and students and teachers. So thank you for that. We're going to take a break right now for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to be guided and led by Reverend Cristina Moon in some mindful movements. But first, Casey is going to be explaining something that we wanted to do a little earlier and got a little jumbled, and I got a little mixed up. So there's a Jamboard, and Casey's going to describe that to you all if you want to participate. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Thank you all. My name is Casey Madame, she, her, and hers, and I am a vice president of the board of directors at the Vista Buddhist Temple. So I'm very excited to be with you all today. One of the things that we wanted to do was invite you all to participate a little bit more, similar to what Mushim has just shared with all of us. We'd like to get your thoughts and ideas on this question. What have you done that's created joy and or renewal for yourself during the last few years? So I'm going to put in the chat a Jamboard, and I'll also share my screen and talk a little bit about how Jamboard works. I want to mention that you do not need to be logged in to be able to access the Jamboard. But the idea is that we would be in virtual community with each other on this virtual board and add our thoughts to this question. So let me share my screen and just really quickly orient all of us to how Jamboard works. So again, this is the Jamboard. Over here on the left-hand side, you'll see some icons, and one of them looks like a little virtual sticky note. If you click on that sticky, you can write your answer. You can write several answers if you have them to that question. Again, here's the question. What have you done that's created joy and or renewal for yourself during the last few years? And on that sticky, you can just drop some things in. So as an example, I know some people enjoy doing puzzles. Oops, I lost my puzzle during the last few years as a way to renew, recharge, reading books. And feel free, even if you see these answers from other people, you're more than welcome to add them again. And as you can see, the ideas that I've put in dropped in as little sticky notes. We invite you to do something similar. Any and everything that you've done for yourself, please feel free to add it to the board. The idea is maybe you might find some ideas that other people have done that you think, oh, I would really like to try that. So at the end of this event, we will be able to create some images of these Jamboards, and that's something that you can take away from today's event. So again, the idea is that we're sharing ideas with each other. Yes, there is a way to draw on the board, but if you want to focus on just using the sticky notes, that would be great. And I'm going to turn it back over. I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Judy.
Thank you, Casey. So we're going to take about a 5-minute break right now, and then we'll come back. It's optional to be participating in the mindful movements, but I invite you all. We've been sitting for quite a long time, or in a stationary position for quite a long time. And then also, if you're having trouble with the Jamboard, you can also put the words into the chat, and then we can make that accessible and put that onto the Jamboard so that you'll be included there as well. So we'll see you here, back here in about 5 minutes, which would be around 20 minutes after the hour. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Reverend Cristina, are we ready to get started?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, this is pretty simple. If you can, I encourage you to get up and step back from your computer, but you can also do this seated if you cannot get up. So just really simple, we're going to combine breath and movement, and you're going to stand with your feet together and interlace your fingers in front of you. And you're going to breathe in, taking a really deep breath in through the mouth, and raise your hands. Right about here, they're going to flip over all the way up to the ceiling, still breathing in, up on your tippy toes, and then exhale through the nose. And we're just going to repeat this a bunch of times. And let's try to do it all together at the same time. So just before I go, that kind of breathing I was just doing is called nyo breathing or ah breathing. So at the front of any, most Zen temples in Japan, you would see these big black statues of these guardian deities that look really fierce. And one has his mouth open and the other one, they're doing this really intense kind of breathing. But it's, even if you just did that, that would be so great for you. It's opening your mouth wide like you're swallowing in the air. And exhale. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Moon, for that. I hope everyone had a chance to do that. And if you haven't, you can do it on your own at different parts of your day. So thank you. So we're going to move into a little bit different of a modality of our gathering today. And that is, I'm going to invite our 3 speakers back onto Zoom. And we are going to do a little bit of Q&A, dialogue, conversation, but sort of to get us into this space, I wanted to ask the 3 of you, do you have any reflections now that we have our Jamboard and it's filled with various things that our guests today, our community, are doing? Anything stand out to you? Any reflections for you? Anything that you're thinking, oh, I didn't do that. I've never done that before. I'd like to try that. Anything in particular stand out for you? I think genealogy is very interesting, like taking this time to really learn about who you are, your roots, cooking, going back to the temple. Anything in particular to you?
I've been interested in rock tumbling, so I'm excited to see somebody else was doing it.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is? I'm not sure I know what that is.
So I know that there's machines that you can buy, so you can like collect river rocks, and there's different grits, I think, of sand, and then you just put them in this tumbler and they get bright and shiny and beautiful. And I was collecting like stones and rocks too, so I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Any other thoughts or reflections from our speakers?
Well, I'm just noticing as I'm looking at what everyone has posted, it really brings me a lot of happiness. As I read each one and whatever my concept of it is, I feel very happy. And I notice there is a hand up from Celeste.
Yes.
Oh, hi, this is Celeste from the Spokane Buddhist Temple. Reverend Candice, that was me doing the rock tumbling. And you do buy a little machine. You collect some rocks about 2.5 inches in diameter and put them in the machine with a little bit of different grit. And it's amazing how plain old river rock, which you don't think is just a gray or brown rock, how beautifully some of them come out after tumbling them through the process. And it does take a while. So it's kind of fun.
Oh, thanks, Les. We'll have to talk more when we see each other. It reminds me of Shinran's words of turning bits of rubble into gold.
To gold.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
I did like the post-it about learning the chants in Japanese. And I just think that I've heard a fair amount of people complaining recently, actually, that the chants in Japanese, they don't think they should be in Japanese anymore because people can't understand them and it feels antiquated. But at Chozenji, we do our okyo, our chanting in Japanese, but it's really because of the vibration that it creates in your body, like the actual resonance of the sounds. And when you aren't stuck on the meaning of the words necessarily, because it is a foreign language and they're foreign sounds, and some of them are even gibberish at this point because it's like a Chinese, Japanese sounding way of pronouncing the ancient Sanskrit. But it's not like you couldn't find a translation anymore of Namu Samanda, for example. But what it does is it forces you to be in your body, do something with your body, and find this really fundamental sort of spontaneous and sincere way of chanting and connecting with the faith that, isn't conceptual. It's like manual labor, and I love it.
So we received some questions during the registration, and I'm going to offer the questions to the panel, and feel free to chime in. I'm actually going to combine a couple of questions because I think they're related. So here's the first one. Workaholism and burnout are things I've encountered a lot in social change sectors. It seems to me that there's a workaholic understanding of selflessness and doing nothing that differs a lot from the Buddhist understanding of these terms. In the workaholic view, selflessness seems to mean having no boundaries, even if that's putting one's preservation and wellness at risk, and doing nothing or allowing things to be as they are is considered blasphemous, even unethical. What are your thoughts on this idea? And I think in general, one of the other questions and themes that keeps surfacing in the questions we're receiving is how do you engage in social justice work? How do you engage in the work that you do? How do you help plan retreat? Being part of an organizing committee in a restful way so that you are not overcharging yourself.
Well, I can speak just a little bit to that. Something that the communities I'm part of in justice activism have been engaging in, which I feel is really, really helpful and fruitful for me, certainly, is there is a wonderful, maybe you can put this in the chat, list online of the characteristics of white supremacist culture, which oppresses white people too, oppresses everyone. And the top two characteristics are perfectionism and sense of urgency. And this is something that I feel I can look at in myself, I can look at in the groups that I'm part of, and identify and very compassionately call it out when we're trying to be too perfectionist about something, and also when we're getting caught up in, I mean, things are urgent, there's no doubt about that, yet it's a sense of constant urgency that can burn out ourselves and others, because it demands that we keep working until we drop dead. And if we look at it that way, some of the early training that I received here in Oakland, which is a very activist, has a magnificent activist history, including the Black Panthers and so forth, was from a group that said that they had all made a group commitment to enjoy their kids, enjoy their lives, to take time off, to not get caught up in a sense of urgency after 2 members of their collective had died young. And they all agreed that it was because of stress-related causes. So sometimes it takes that much, and I hope it won't take that much for all of us. And also, I'm a writer, the only thing I've ever written that's gone viral is on Lions Roar Media, and it's called I Vow Not to Burn Out. So people are always approaching me as an expert, which I am not, because I burn out also. However, I try to bring myself back. And if you like, if you can just Google that quickly and put that into the chat, you could just take a look at that. It's really making a commitment to say that what I stand for is joy and liberation. It's not burnout and overwork.
Yeah, I would say, fundamentally, so as someone whose first career was, and in some ways still is, activism and social change, social justice, my own journey was realizing that my burnout and my workaholic tendencies originated in my own attachment to the work, to who I was, to being an activist, to being right, to the value that put sort of on my life or on my work, and the origins of that also in certain, painful things in my life, especially my childhood. So the origins, I think, of any of the suffering, well, let me rephrase that. I know that the origins of any of our suffering is really from our own attachments. It's not, it takes unique form in activism and social change work, but it's definitely not unique. You can be a healthcare worker and your whole life is about providing healthcare and being a doctor, and that will be a recipe for burnout. You can be a police officer, you can be a chef, and those same attachments will lead to the same ends. So that's why it's really important that we use what we have, the Dharma, as much as we can in every situation that we're in every life that we live.
And if I could piggyback just a little bit, I think maybe one of my own attachments, speaking about my ministry, was the expectations, especially being new, and I'm only 7 years into my ministry, my own expectations. I want my ministry to be perfect. I want it to be this way. And there was a sense of urgency to learn everything in my first year, which was impossible to be able to do. And even as I was transferred, I knew that every temple was different. Every need was different. So of course, all of my assignments were going to be new, and I had to start all over again. But I think part of going back to the boundaries, I had learned that setting boundaries is part of self-care. And I would accept speaking engagements. If somebody needed me, I would say yes. My schedule would be packed full of different engagements, and I was burning out very quickly. And not just in the ministry, but in my previous career too. But I was taught that if we can set boundaries, even though perhaps our friends, our loved ones, our temple members may not necessarily agree, but we can teach them how to set healthy boundaries too, when we are able to implement that in our own lives. And I think part of the trouble that I was faced with was previous ministers saying, we never take time off. We never take our vacations. And they're commended for that. And it's a show of dedication. And I understand that. I understand the expectation. However, I think many of us in the younger generation, we too want to set good examples of taking time off to care for our needs, so that our members take time to care for their needs too. But I of course, will be honest, there's some shame and guilt that comes with that. Personally speaking, when I do take time off, when, say, for example, my mentor never took time off. So it's definitely something that I have to work through, but also breaking that cycle of not caring for our personal needs, perhaps specifically in the ministry.
Thank you to all three of you. So how can Buddhist meditation practice help people in recognizing and overcoming learned helplessness? How can Buddhist meditation practice help people in recognizing and overcoming learned helplessness?
I can take a shot at that. One thing to remember is that even in the lifetime of the historical Buddha, he taught some 40 different kinds of meditation. So there is no one Buddhist meditation. There are many different forms. And then have been sort of identified or created through innovation over the 2000 years. So one could see that aspect of the Eightfold Noble Path of right meditation as also choose the one that makes sense in the moment. And if your goal is to combat this sense of learned helplessness, then one style of meditation that's very active would be really good. Finding meditation, that meditative aspect in movement could be really good, through feeling in your body or sitting with your eyes open, sitting in community, that sort of thing, challenging yourself. So this is a hallmark of, how we sit here, because we're a martial arts dojo and, we're trying to build strength, spiritual strength in people, but we sit for 45 minutes and you don't move. And it's very, very, very hard not to move for 45 minutes. But especially when you've got a whole room of people and you're all doing it together and your eyes are open and you're hearing and you're seeing and you're feeling everything, you have the experience again and again and again and again of, man, I don't know if I can make it. I really need the Jiki to ring the bell. Like, I don't know if I can keep going for another 5 minutes. And then you survive and you made it the 5 minutes that you didn't think you were going to make. You did the thing that you thought you couldn't do. And bit by bit, you experience the transcendence of your own self-imposed limitations. And that certainly helps with overcoming a sense of learned helplessness. But that's just one example.
I see Tai Chi is in the chat as another example. Yoga, chanting, employing the thing that works the best for you, I think is an important message. Thank you. So again, actually, I'm going to bring this back to you, Reverend Moon. You've spoken in the past about spiritual strength. Strength takes energy. How do you build up and maintain that energy?
By letting go. Cutting away all the stuff that's sucking your energy unnecessarily. Yeah, it makes no sense rationally. Is like in conventional math, it's like 1 + 1 = 2. And essentially what I'm saying is that like 2 - 1 will somehow equal 3. But it is. The more you let go, the more energy you have, the more strength you find. But you got to figure out what there is to let go. As my tea teacher would say, just cut it.
Thank you. So bringing us back actually to one of the practices, I have heard that chanting for 10 minutes is as beneficial to our well-being as a long meditation segment. Do you find this to be true? Have you found chanting to be particularly impactful for you?
Depends on how you do it.
Yeah, I would say for myself that having done a lot of sitting meditation in the past, that I think chanting for people in the United States is a really, really good practice, and particularly since the pandemic, when things have become so very sedentary. You know, I've just said, I know this is going to sound terrible, but stop with the goddamn sitting. You know, it will ruin your body. I heard in the medical field they were calling sitting the new smoking after the pandemic began, because people just weren't able to, and especially for those of us in the Asian American community, the anti-Asian violence. I mean, my son and I just wouldn't even leave this apartment for months because we thought we're like moving targets. What the heck? So a lot of sedentary things, and chanting is something that involves the whole body. It involves rhythm, breath, and it can be very, very energizing. It can be calming. There are lots of different chants, and right now, I'm just getting ready at East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, which is where I mainly teach, to finish up a class series called The Path of the Bodhisattva. And what I've done it through is through a lot of YouTube videos. So that's very accessible to people. And we've done a really fun dive into the Heart Sutra, chanted in different languages, which are all on YouTube videos, and there are musical versions, and there are pop music versions, and English and Korean, Japanese, Tibetan, Chinese, and just so that people begin to really feel in their bodies how life-giving a practice that chanting can be. It can be beautiful, it can be fun, it can be profound, and mainly it really gets things moving.
So in our temples, in our Jodo Shinshu temples, at least in Stockton, we don't have a sitting practice, and so we utilize and encourage people to our members to chant. I come from a temple that they're very, very quiet, and so I want to kind of break that that environment of being quiet when they're chanting, because there is, of course, a meditative practice in chanting. But one thing that I had always stressed when I was at the temple by myself on Sundays, looking at everybody through Zoom, really encouraging our members to chant at home. And although it might feel a little bit different if they're not used to chanting by themselves at home, but there was this oneness, this collaboration that I was hoping that everybody could feel still, even though we were all apart, that we would still be chanting the sutras from 2,500 years ago, to still connect us in some deep way, even though we hadn't seen each other for how many years. So I hope that was something that invigorated them at home, because it was calming for me to be able to do it, even if I was all by myself. But it has brought me a lot of joy to finally be with our members, to hear everybody chanting, to the point where I think the first time I had heard it, I teared up, just to be able to hear everybody's voice all in unison. So for me, it was very, very moving.
Just to elaborate on what I said a little facetiously earlier, that I think the mechanics of it are important in terms of if you're looking for that outcome of meditation. So or a meditative feeling. And we have this big emphasis on breath and posture. And I would say if you're doing the chanting and you're sort of slumped over and you're holding the book down here so that you have to look down and Namu Samandamo Dona Noara Jiko Doja, it's a very different feeling from sit up straight. If you need to hold the book, hold it in front of your face so that your neck's not bent. And then just all the energy you have. Namu Samandamo Dona Noara Jiko Doja Sono Nando Jido. And it's just a really different feeling, and you create this vibration, like you literally, it's like massaging your internal organs, and all of your attention, your concentration, it's really hard to be thinking of something else when you're going as loud as you can, and that really focuses your mind.
The next time I'm sitting in temple chanting, I'm going to think of that idea of massaging my internal organs. I really like that. Thank you. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question, and it's going to be a little bit different than the other questions in terms of theme. What do you employ to help you navigate the additional opportunities and challenges that come with being Asian American women and Asian American Buddhist teachers and Asian American women Buddhist teachers? You can answer just the last one if that's easy.
What was the first part of the question?
What do you employ to help you navigate the additional opportunities and challenges that come with being Asian American women Buddhist teachers? I would say, especially in the last couple of years, I think, Mushim, you mentioned the Asian hate that we're facing. What have you done? How have you protected yourselves, built yourselves up to navigate the different challenges, let's say, that you've had to experience? And
Maybe
also within your Buddhist practices.
Oh, sorry, Casey. Maybe I can just, I was thinking about myself and just like getting out of my own way in some sense. And again, I think this was, it talks about my insecurities and being in a national organization where all of my colleagues are mostly male or identify as male. And my insecurity of not being smart enough or trying to follow in my mentor's footsteps or in doing and presenting the Dharma in the way that it was presented before. And I think once I got out of my own way and remembered, just be sincere, just be authentically you, present the Dharma that resonates with you in a way that resonates with you, that people will be able to see you as a person. And maybe not as just an Asian American woman Buddhist teacher, but just as a person who is still learning, is still a companion in the Dharma with them. And I think it just resonated with me when my mentor, Reverend Dr. David Matsumoto, said, just be you and it's okay. Just be authentically you. And that's just something I always have to remind myself of. And before, in my Dharma messages, when I would tackle very emotional things or examples in my life, when I would share them, I would cry. And at times it would be about my mom or the way that the Dharma had impacted me. And I would profusely apologize for crying in a Dharma message. And of course, I don't want to shine the light on myself. I still want to be able to share the Dharma, but I think being able to share myself is sharing tears, especially with others who are shedding tears at memorial services or funerals, knowing that like, hey, Reverend Candice is still a person too, and not just seen as a minister. So I think, again, that I just had to get out of my own way and stop screwing with my own head and just be cool with where I was at, and know that, it was going to take time to get my grounding, being a new minister.
Well, what's helped me are a couple things. Number one, as you have heard, I have very strong women in my family. So my mother was one of the very first women pharmacists in Ohio, maybe in the United States. I don't know. She was really good in science and math. And one time my father was making himself difficult, which he often did. And she said, "Bob, if you don't stop, I will not do your income taxes." He just shut up and walked out of the room, because she was like just really good at math and science. And so she blazed her own path. She went back to work full time when we were little. She went through the pharmacist training after she had all her children. And so just by being a role model, I didn't really grow up at all with the stereotype or any version thereof of like the submissive, silent Asian or Asian American women. We were kind of the opposite, I would say. And then also, I'm very mindful that years ago I was part of a team of 3, and we spent an entire year organizing the very first, I think, and only Asian American Pacific Islander Dharma retreat and conference at Spirit Rock. It was 7 days with teachers from all the various lineages in 2004. And so we were beginning to unpack the term Asian American. So I called my honorary niece, who was getting a degree in ethnic studies, and I thought, she will be able to tell me. And I said, "Ellie, how do you define Asian American?" She is an Asian American. And she said, "I wouldn't even try." And I thought, oh, shoot, we're down the drain. And the more we looked into it, once again, yes, like, what does Asian American mean? So just living in such a way that I remember that all of these categories are both provisional and fluid, like gender, like race, like any of these constructs. And I don't want to live in such a way that I'm captured by them, no matter what anyone else projects on me.
I think my answer is a combination of what Reverend Shibata and Mushim just said, and a building on the just being myself part is hard, because while I have a fairly healthy ego, I also see, or maybe that allows me to see, all the ways that I make mistakes and I do things wrong. And it's frustrating and it's hard to see those again and again. And in a dojo environment, oh boy, you see it a lot, and people point it out to you and scold you. So I see it. And what's actually helped me is not that I went looking for it, but I've come across some like accounts or the stories of some of the early Zen women, and like Empress Danrin, who built the first Zen monastery in Japan, and the Chiyono, the Zen nun, one of the first female Zen masters in Japan, an abbess of a convent. And there's just something like, when I read their stories, I am just inspired by them. And it's in part because they're women, and I also forget that they're women. And so that's kind of the way that I try to think of for myself, the just being myself in the context, and like, I am in this female body, identify as female in society, and in a relatively like male dominated, place. And there's a just being myself that, yeah, I have to kind of figure out what that means. And of course, like self in the small lowercase s, and capital true self sort of sense too. And I also look at the women in my life, and in particular here at the dojo at Chozenji, the different archetypes and the different women who've come before me, and really, they're all different. So you take a little bit from here and I take a little bit from there, and I figure out sort of what sense makes sense for me, where the inspiration can come from. And then one of these ladies, kind of one of my aunties who's a Roshi, a Zen master, she also said, because we're in a martial arts context, and she trained in Eskrima, she's Filipina, so she trained in Eskrima, the Filipino martial art, for a long time, and she was very serious and very high ranking. And she said, well, it always helped that I could always kick all the boys' butts. And I was like, you're right. And it inspired me I've gotten more serious about my kendo in the past year. And I'm 40 now, and there are 25-year-old guys in that class who can run faster and have more energy and who are stronger than me. But I do really delight and derive a lot of confidence from the fact that as long as we're still in kendo class and operating by the rules of kendo, I can still kick their butts. And then we bow at the end. And everyone's friends. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Thank you so much to all three of you for that, for your answers. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the questions that were offered in the chat, but we're wrapping up our gathering today. I want to thank our three Dharma teachers for an incredible couple of hours. Thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability. I wanted to invite Mushim to offer merit as we close our gathering today.
If by our words and our actions we have generated any goodness and merit during our time together, I believe that we have, I hope that we have, then let us dedicate it instantly to others. In the words of Shantideva, may all beings everywhere, plagued with sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of what we have done together today. May those feeble with cold find warmth, and may those oppressed with heat be cooled by the boundless waters that pour forth from the great clouds of the Bodhisattva's merits. May the rains of lava, blazing stones, and weapons from now on become a rain of flowers, and may all battling with weapons from now on be a playful exchange of flowers. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, and those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find new hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. This is my favorite stanza. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting one another. May all embodied creatures uninterruptedly hear the sound of Dharma issuing from birds and trees, beams of light, and even space itself. And this is the favorite verse of His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then, may we too abide to dispel the misery of the world. May all beings be well and happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mushim. What a beautiful way to end our time here today. And there's so many gems to take away. One of the things that's touching me right now is to remember that we have been here all along, since the time of the Buddha. It couldn't have been a Buddha without a mother and a family and siblings and cousins and friends on the path. So thank you that we are transforming and doing it right now by our just being present here today. I have just a few announcements that I'd like to share today. The recording will be available, and we'll be sending that out soon, along with a survey and then some of the resources that the teachers have all shared today. So if there's anything else, Reverend Moon or Reverend Shibata or Mushim, if you'd like to share with us to offer to the attendees, we'd like to make that available and possible. And let me just look at my notes here for a moment. We have mindfulness in Shin Buddhism. Even though that's not a part of our traditional practice, we do offer that every Wednesday from 7 to 8 p.m. Pacific time. And then also Sunday Dharma service, and Dharma school is starting up again. So I invite you to check out our website. There'll be a link in the chat if that's something you'd like to do. We offer the Buddhist Community Gathering freely, and also appreciate dana or generosity. And there'll be a link for that in the chat as well. And then I'd like to just close with Gasho today. Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu. Thank you everyone for being here today.